They roared, smoked, rattled, and then disappeared. Once hailed as the future of American power, these engine brands ended up as scrap metal and lawsuits. They built motors that shook docks, drained wallets, and shattered reputations. Some were too bold, others too broken, but all of them share one fate: they vanished. This isn't just a list of bad engines, it's a graveyard of American ambition gone wrong. Chrysler stormed into the marine world in 1965 after acquiring West Bend's outboard division, aiming to dominate both budget and high-performance waters. They actually succeeded, briefly. Their 35-horsepower model became the rental fleet standard across America, while the 210-horsepower Chrysler Marine V8 proved they could play in the big leagues too. But Chrysler's biggest mistake? Treating boats like cars. They stubbornly clung to points ignition when the industry was moving to electronic systems. Worse, they used metric bolts on engines meant for American waters, frustrating mechanics who relied on standard tools. Reliability suffered, reputations tanked, and customers walked. Legend says Chrysler's own CEO, Lee Iacocca, pulled the plug after his outboard died mid-fishing trip. Whether myth or not, it perfectly sums up the brand's fall from grace. Even the wild 115-horsepower Charger model, nicknamed the Mullet on Water, couldn't save the division. It was punchy, loud, and looked fast standing still, but that flair couldn't hide systematic failures in design and support. In the end, Chrysler's marine venture collapsed under its own arrogance, proof that automotive success doesn't guarantee marine mastery. Today, collectors still chase the nostalgia, but mechanics curse the legacy Chrysler left behind. Force Outboards were Mercury's awkward marine experiment, born from the ashes of Chrysler Marine. On paper, they looked like a budget win, offering popular horsepower ranges like the 120 HP that bass anglers loved. But behind the decals was a mess of mismatched engineering and marketing spin. Here's what Mercury didn't advertise. Many Force engines used the same powerheads as Mercury's high-end Black Max models, but slapped on cheaper parts, cheaper paint, and cost-cut electronics. The result? Bargain bin Mercury performance, with all the drama, none of the polish. Mechanics called them farce for good reason. Ignition issues were legendary, build quality was inconsistent, service manuals were confusing. Still, the price point lured in budget-conscious buyers who thought they were getting a secret deal. But the secret got out. Mercury's attempt to protect their premium image while offloading Chrysler's tech backfired. Dealers were split, customers were frustrated, and Mercury finally killed Force in 1999, ending a strange chapter in outboard history. Force Motors did one thing well, reminding everyone that badge engineering has limits. No amount of rebadging could hide the cut corners. Today, Force survives as a cautionary tale. When a company tries to be two brands at once, both usually fail. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more untold stories from boating's forgotten past. Stick around till the end. One of these so-called failures actually invented a core feature used in every modern outboard today. They changed boating forever, and still went bankrupt. You don't want to miss it. Bombardier Recreational Products, or BRP, was once one of the most formidable names in marine power, thanks largely to its Evinrude and Johnson brands. After acquiring Outboard Marine Corporation's assets in 2001, BRP tried to revive the struggling icons with a bold bet: cleaner, smarter, two-stroke technology. The result? Evinrude's E-TEC direct injection outboards. Marketed as quieter, more fuel-efficient, and emission-compliant alternatives to four-strokes. And for a time it worked. E-TEC engines won innovation awards, satisfied EPA mandates, and earned fierce loyalty from freshwater anglers and rescue operators. But BRP made a fateful decision to double down on two-stroke tech just as the global market swung toward four-strokes. Competitors like Yamaha and Mercury expanded their lineups with lightweight, bulletproof four-strokes that outpaced Evinrude in sales, support, and reliability perception. By 2020, BRP had enough. In a shocking announcement, they shut down Evinrude production entirely, citing COVID-19 pressures and changing consumer demand. Just like that, the oldest outboard brand in America vanished. BRP still thrives with Sea-Doo, Ski-Doo, and Can-Am, but its marine engine legacy dead in the water. A brutal reminder that even giants can misread the tide, and that innovation, timing, and market alignment must all row in the same direction. You've heard of Muncie for their legendary rock crusher transmissions, but before that they tried conquering water. Their Neptune brand outboards were technically brilliant, starting with the iconic Mighty Might 1.2 horsepower kicker, America's top-selling small outboard in 1935. These weren't your average Depression-era motors. Muncie used die-cast aluminium pistons, chrome-plated cylinders, and ball-bearing wrist pins, tech that wouldn't be common for decades. The build quality was jaw-dropping, but so was the price. And that was the problem. While competitors like Evinrude and Johnson slashed prices and simplified builds, Muncie delivered boutique-grade over-engineering that Americans simply couldn't afford during the Depression. Their outboards were too refined for their own market. Dealers loved the quality but couldn't move units. Customers loved the looks but couldn't justify the cost. Eventually, Muncie smartly exited the marine game and returned to automotive transmissions, where their commitment to precision would later birth the world-famous M22 rock crusher. In the end, Muncie's marine division didn't collapse from failure. It collapsed from being too good too soon, at a time when America was just trying to stay afloat. The Mighty Might remains a collector's dream, but Muncie's marine legacy is a tale of engineering brilliance crushed by economic reality. Clinton engines carved their way into the outboard world using the same DNA that made their chainsaws reliable winter warriors. Their yellow-painted, air-cooled Clinton Chief 5 horsepower became a duck hunter's best friend, able to run in freezing weather, shallow water, and thick mud where other motors choked. The brilliance, air-cooled simplicity, no impellers to crack, no water pumps to clog. The engines were light, tough, and started when others wouldn't. Pull starts worked in January, maintenance was basic, and for shallow, rugged environments they were practically bulletproof. So what went wrong? Clinton refused to evolve. While the marine world transitioned to higher horsepower, sleeker designs, and water-cooled engines, Clinton stuck with small, loud, niche products. They never scaled, they never diversified, and they never offered a real solution for larger boats. In 1980, Esker bought the patents, but by then the world had moved on. Clinton's once loyal customer base remained in the marshes, limited, dedicated, but not enough to sustain a business. Clinton's failure wasn't mechanical, it was strategic. They bet everything on a rugged niche and ignored the rising tide of consumer demand. Being reliable in one environment isn't enough when the whole industry is evolving without you. Champion began as an independent outboard maker with bold styling and a hot rod attitude. Their 7.5 horsepower hot rod model looked like a motorcycle engine and performed with surprising zip. But things went downhill fast when OMC bought Champion and repurposed it as a budget alternative to Evinrude. What did that mean for customers? Confusion and betrayal. OMC sold Champions that were literally Evinrudes with cheaper parts and different decals, but didn't lower the prices accordingly. When buyers realized they'd paid full price for what amounted to a dressed-down Evinrude, the backlash was immediate. Dealers got angry, customers felt duped, and Champion's reputation sank like a stone. OMC eventually pulled the plug to preserve Evinrude's image, but the damage was done. To this day, identifying a true champion versus a rebadged Gale-built model requires serious detective work. Serial numbers, paint codes, and even dealer prep history come into play. Champion's story is one of branding gone wrong. Instead of carving a unique identity, OMC used it as a dumping ground for rebranded inventory. In the process, they created a product that wasn't trusted, respected, or supported. And that's how a promising name got buried by corporate greed. Also, like and subscribe for more forgotten marine stories. Your support keeps these hidden histories alive. Stay tuned for more. Gale wasn't just a brand, it was a factory powerhouse that secretly built more outboards than Johnson and Evinrude combined. But you wouldn't know it, because Gale's motors wore other people's names. Sea King, CB, Buccaneer, Goodyear, Hiawatha, you name it. Their business model, genius on paper. One engine design, rebranded for 20-plus retailers, each demanding exclusive features. They pressure-cast blocks when others were still sand-casting. Their 12-horsepower Sovereign and 25-horsepower Buccaneer were solid performers. So what went wrong? Retailer greed. Department stores kept demanding lower prices to maintain profit margins. Gale responded by cutting corners. Cheaper parts, thinner materials, lower tolerances. Eventually, the same engines that once rivaled Johnson's were viewed as disposable. When Sears and other major buyers switched to Japanese imports in the early 60s, Gale's sprawling badge-engineered empire collapsed overnight. Parts became a nightmare, because under one paint job might be a Clinton block, a Gale carb, and Chrysler wiring. Gale's motors still run today, if you can decode them, but the brand never stood on its own, and that's what killed it. No identity, no loyalty, no future. An industry giant, forgotten by name, proof that making everything for everyone can mean standing for nothing. Firestone is a household name for tires, not boat motors. But in the mid-20th century, Firestone dipped into marine waters with outboards built by Scott Atwater and Gale. Their marketing pitch: Firestone quality on land and sea. And to drive the point home, their 5-horsepower cruiser even came with fuel tanks shaped like miniature tires. Quirky, yes. Effective, not at all. The biggest problem wasn't the engines. They were fine for casual use. The problem was with customer confusion. Buyers expected their local Firestone tire shop to fix their outboard motors. Dealers who knew tires but not carburetors were overwhelmed and frustrated. Firestone's foray into marine sales clashed with their automotive core business. Marine engines require specialized support, parts logistics, and dealer training, none of which Firestone invested in. The experiment became a distraction, not a division. By the time Firestone pulled the plug, the damage was done. Collectors today treasure those tire-shaped fuel tanks as novelty items, but that's all Firestone's marine legacy really is, a quirky side quest. This wasn't an engineering failure, it was a branding disaster. Sometimes staying in your lane isn't just smart, it's survival. Firestone didn't just miss the boat, they confused the dock. Sea King motors ruled the department store era. For over 40 years, Sears slapped the Sea King name on thousands of outboards. Built by Gale, Clinton, West Bend, even Chrysler. Some were fantastic, some were junk, but here's the catch: you never knew what you were getting. Sears prioritized price and volume over consistency. One year your Sea King might have Gale internals, the next it might be Clinton. Some models had electric start, others didn't, even if they looked identical. There was no standardization, no long-term parts support, and very little loyalty among service techs. The final nail in the coffin: Japanese manufacturers like Honda and Yamaha refused to private label. That meant Sears couldn't continue the rebadge game. By the late 1970s, Sea King disappeared from catalogs, and good luck finding matching parts today without decoding serial numbers and opening the cowl. Sea King's failure wasn't mechanical, it was identity crisis at scale. Customers couldn't trust the brand because it wasn't one brand, it was a dozen in disguise. What started as a clever retail strategy ended in chaos. Sea King became the poster child for what happens when marketing outpaces engineering and when branding becomes a shell game. Koenig outboards were Formula One on water. Literally, their 500cc twin-cylinder engine pumped out a mind-bending 100 horsepower from just 30 cubic inches. That's more than double the output of Mercury's top racing motors at the time. These weren't fishing engines, they were screaming two-stroke beasts designed for speed and nothing else. American racing circuits were so stunned by Koenig's performance that they tried to ban them outright. They ran on aviation fuel, required constant tuning, and weren't so much started as unleashed. If you didn't know what you were doing, they'd destroy your boat, or your confidence, within minutes. But Koenig made one fatal mistake. They thought regular boaters wanted race motors. They didn't. These engines were temperamental, fragile under casual use, and nearly impossible to maintain without European parts and a German-speaking mechanic. When founder Dieter Koenig died in 1978, so did the brand. The tech was too advanced, the market too niche. Even Mercury and OMC poached their engineers, but no one revived the name. Koenig is a classic case of overperformance without purpose. They won on the track, but failed at the dock. The engines were legendary, but commercially they were undrivable dreams. In the Louisiana marshes, Go Devil was king. Invented by Warren Coco Sr., these air-cooled surface-drive mud motors were brilliantly simple, able to push flat-bottom boats through inches of muck, weeds, and shallow water where traditional outboards failed. Their 18-horsepower classics became the gold standard for duck hunters. Built tough, easy to fix, no water pump, no frills, and that was the problem. As the rest of the industry embraced electric start, reverse gears, and quieter operation, Go Devil stubbornly clung to its 1940s design. Then came Mud Buddy, an upstart brand offering everything Go Devil wouldn't. Modern ergonomics, practical reverse, and smart integration. Go Devil dismissed it all. They didn't evolve, they dug in their heels. When Go Devil's patents expired, the market flooded with clones. Competition surged, dealers jumped ship. Go Devil filed bankruptcy. To this day, some hunters swear by the original simplicity, but others want GPS, reverse, and a motor that doesn't rattle their fillings loose. And now Go Devil's once unshakable dominance is a memory. Go Devil didn't die from bad engineering, it died from refusing to change. Sometimes being the first doesn't mean you'll be the last. Anzani outboards were rolling works of art, or rather floating ones. With roots in aviation and motorcycle racing, they brought Italian engineering flair to American lakes. Their Aquamatic Supersport 50 featured horizontally opposed cylinders for vibration-free power, polished aluminium casings, and leather-wrapped tiller handles. Even the exhaust note sounded like a Ducati. They introduced hydraulic shifting when American motors still clunked mechanically. Everything about Anzani screamed luxury and precision. So why did they vanish? Price and support. Anzani motors cost twice as much as Mercury, with parts that had to be shipped from Milan, when they were available at all. American dealers had no clue how to service them, often baffled by metric fasteners and unfamiliar technology. The motors were too sophisticated for casual boaters and too fragile for hard use. By 1965, Anzani retreated to Europe, leaving behind gorgeous but impractical machines. Today, collectors treat them like fine art, but back then, they were seen as overcomplicated showpieces. Anzani's downfall wasn't quality, it was misalignment with the American market. When style, engineering, and pricing don't meet local expectations, even brilliance fades. A masterpiece that never belonged. Beautiful, misunderstood, and inevitably abandoned. Thanks for diving into the forgotten world of America's worst outboard engine makers. Their failures teach us lessons about innovation, timing, and humility. If you enjoyed this trip through marine history, like, subscribe, and share to keep these stories afloat. Got a favorite forgotten brand or a story to tell? Drop it in the comments below. Until next time, keep your engines running and your adventures endless.